Erima was a cheerful 20-year-old girl living with her family in the bustling mainland of Lagos State, Nigeria. In their modest two-bedroom apartment, she shared a room with her siblings while her parents occupied the other. Her father, Mr. Okpankun, was a hard-working trader at the famous Alaba market. Despite the challenges, he labored tirelessly to provide for his family. One sunny morning, as Erima woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window, she stretched and yawned, ready to face the day. She glanced at the clock and realized it was already past sunrise. Time to wake everyone, she called out to her siblings, gently shaking them awake. Uzoma, her younger brother, grumbled as he rubbed his eyes. Do we have to? I was having such a good dream. Erima chuckled. Come on, Uzoma. Dad will be up soon, and you know he doesn't like it when we are late for breakfast. With a collective groan, the siblings dragged themselves out of bed and headed to the kitchen, where their mother, Mrs. Okpanko, was already busy preparing breakfast. Good morning, Mama, Erima greeted, wrapping her arms around her mother in a warm hug. Good morning, my dear, Mrs. Okpanko replied, returning the embrace. Did you sleep well? Yes, Mama, Erima nodded, but I had the strangest dream last night. I was flying over the city like a bird. Her mother chuckled. Sounds like an adventure dream. Maybe it's a sign of good things to come. As they sat down to eat, Mr. Okpanko joined them at the table, his face tired but determined. Another day, another opportunity to make our dreams a reality, he said, offering a smile to his family. After breakfast, Erima helped her mother with the dishes before getting ready for the day ahead. She glanced at the calendar on the wall and remembered that it was market day for her father. Can I come with you to the market today, Dad? She asked eagerly. Mr. Okpanko paused, considering her request. Hmm, I suppose you could use a break from the routine. All right, you can come along, but remember to stay close and watch your step. The market can be quite chaotic. Erima beamed with excitement, grateful for the chance to spend time with her father outside of their small apartment. As they made their way to the market, she marveled at the sight and sounds of the bustling city, feeling a sense of adventure stirring within her. At the market, Erima helped her father arrange his goods on the makeshift stall, chatting with customers and vendors alike. She watched in as her father negotiated prices and made sales, his determination and resilience shining through despite the challenges he faced. As the day wore on, Erima couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her family's hard work and perseverance. They may not have much, but they had each other, and that was enough to make them feel rich in love and unity. As they packed up the store and headed home at the end of the day, Erima felt a newfound sense of purpose stirring within her. She may not know what the future held, but she was determined to face it head on, just like her parents had taught her. And so, as the sun set over the bustling city of Lagos, Erima's adventure had only just begun. Despite graduating from high school 4 years ago, Erima's dream of attending university remained just like a dream. Her parents, despite their hard work, couldn't afford to send her to school. Determined to make something of herself and help her family, Erima found a job as a sales girl. Her job paid very little, barely enough to cover her own expenses, let alone contribute significantly to her family's needs or save for university. Yet, Erima refused to give up. She knew that every naira she earned could make a difference, no matter how small. One evening, as Erima returned home from another long day at work, she couldn't shake off the feeling of disappointment and envy that gnawed at her heart. Seeing her friends from high school thriving in their studies and careers only intensified her longing for a better future. Sitting at the dinner table with her family, Erima's mind wandered as her siblings chattered excitedly about their day. She felt a pang of guilt for not being able to provide them with the same opportunities her friends had. "Is something bothering you, Erima?" her mother asked, noticing the sadness in her daughter's eyes. Erima forced a smile. "Oh, it's nothing, Mama. Just tired from work, that's all." But her mother knew better. "You have been working so hard, my dear. We are proud of you, you know." Erima nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I know, Mama. I just wish I could do more for all of us." Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You are doing more than enough, Erima. We appreciate everything you are doing for the family." Despite her family's words of encouragement, Erima couldn't shake off the feeling of inadequacy that weighed heavily on her heart. She longed for the opportunity to pursue her dreams and make her parents proud. That night, as Erima lay in bed, she made a silent vow to herself. She would not let her circumstances define her. She would keep pushing, keep striving, until she found a way to make her dreams a reality. And so, day after day, Erima continued to work tirelessly, her determination unwavering in the face of adversity. Though the road ahead was uncertain, she refused to give up hope, for Erima knew that with perseverance and faith, anything was possible. And one day, she believed she could seize the opportunity to go back to school and chase her dreams with all her heart. After another long day at work, Erima joined her father at his shop to help him pack up for the day. As they walked home together, the weight of their struggles hung heavy in the air. "Daddy," Erima began hesitantly, "why do we have to suffer like this? Why can't things be easier for us?" Mr. Okpanko sighed, his shoulders slumping with weariness. "Oh, my dear Erima, if only life were that simple. But you see, sometimes we don't get to choose the path we walk. All we can do is to keep moving forward, no matter how tough the journey may be." Erima listened intently as her father spoke, his words carrying the weight of experience and resilience. She had always admired his strength and determination, even in the face of adversity. "Daddy, what do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Mr. Okpanko paused, his gaze distant as memories flooded his mind. "You see, Erima, there was a time when I was a wealthy man with a thriving business in the heart of Lagos. I had a big plaza in the Lagos big market, filled with goods and merchandise." Erima's eyes widened with surprise. She had never heard this story before. But one day, her father continued, his voice trembling slightly, "I received a call that changed everything. My plaza was on fire." "Erima, Everything I had worked for so hard, gone in one instant. Not even a pin was left behind. Erima's heart ached for her father as she listened to his tale of loss and devastation. She couldn't imagine the pain he must have felt, losing everything he had worked so hard to build. We had to start all over again from scratch. Mr. Okpanko continued, his voice filled with determination. But we didn't give up, Erima. We refused to let despair consume us. We picked ourselves up and kept moving forward, one step at a time. Erima felt a surge of pride and admiration for her father as she listened to his words of wisdom. Despite facing unimaginable hardships, he had never lost hope. Daddy, I'm sorry you had to go through all that, she said softly, squeezing his hand in reassurance. Mr. Okpanko smiled, a twinkle of pride in his eyes. Don't be sorry, my dear. It's all part of life's journey. And through it all, we have learned to appreciate the simple joys, the moments of love and togetherness that money can't buy. As they walked on in companionable silence, Erima felt a newfound sense of strength and resolve stirring within her. She may not have all the answers, but she knew that as long as she had her family by her side, she could face whatever challenges life threw her way. And so, with her father's words of wisdom echoing in her heart, Erima walked on, her spirit renewed and her determination stronger than ever before. For she knew that no matter how dark the night may seem, there was always a glimmer of hope waiting to light the way. One afternoon, as Erima relaxed at home on her day off from work, she was surprised to see her brother Uzoma return from school earlier than usual. His usual cheerful face was clouded with sadness, and Erima could tell that something was wrong. "What's the matter, Uzoma?" she asked, concern etched in her voice. Uzoma sighed heavily, his shoulders slumped with disappointment. "I was sent home from school today, Erima," he confessed. "I haven't paid my school fees or my WAEC exam fees. Dad said there is no money." Erima's heart sank as she listened to her brother's words. She knew how much Uzoma had been looking forward to writing his WAEC exams, a milestone that would open doors to countless opportunities. "Don't worry, Uzoma," Erima said softly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I will figure things out. You will write your exams, I promise." Uzoma's eyes widened in surprise. "But how, Erima? We don't have enough money." Erima took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she knew she had to do. "How much do you need?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. 76,000 naira, Uzoma replied, his voice trembling with emotion. Erima felt a knot form in her stomach as she realized the enormity of the task ahead. But she refused to let fear hold her back. She had made a promise to her brother, and she would do whatever it took to keep it. Rummaging through her belongings, Erima retrieved her savings, counting the money with trembling hands. To her dismay, she realized that she only had 56,000 naira, a shortfall of 20,000 naira. Taking a deep breath, Erima made a decision. She would use her savings to cover as much of Uzoma's fees as she could, and she would make up the rest within her next paycheck. Here, Uzoma, she said, handing him the money. It's not enough, but it's a start. I will give you the rest as soon as I can. Uzoma's eyes brimmed with tears as he embraced his sister tightly. Thank you, Erima, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. You are the best sister anyone could ask for. The next day, as Erima returned from work, she handed Uzoma the remaining 20,000 naira, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the gratitude and relief wash over her brother's face. Her family gathered around, expressing their heartfelt thanks to Erima for her selfless sacrifice. Though they faced many challenges, they knew that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything life threw their way. As Erima looked around at the faces of her loved ones, she knew that her sacrifice had been worth it. For in that moment, she realized that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in the bonds of family and the strength of love. As days turned into weeks, Erima continued to work tirelessly, her determination unwavering despite the challenges that life threw her way. She juggled her job, her responsibilities at home, and the burden of supporting her family with grace and strength beyond her years. But then, tragedy struck. One evening, as Ufoma, Erima's mother, returned home from work and began preparing dinner with her children, their peaceful evening was shattered by a sudden commotion outside their home. Mama Erima, Mama Erima, Mama Erima, the voices cried out in alarm. Ufoma rushed outside to see what was happening, her heart pounding with fear. To her horror, she saw a group of people carrying Mr. Okpanko, her husband, towards their home. His usually vibrant face was pale and lifeless, and her heart clenched with dread. What happened? She demanded, her voice trembling with fear. The people explained that Mr. Okpanko had collapsed in the market, and despite their best efforts, they couldn't revive him. Ufoma's world shattered in an instant as she realized that her husband was gone. She screamed his name, trying to shake him awake, but he remained still and silent, his eyes closed forever. Inside the house, the children heard their mother's cries and rushed to her side, their hearts pounding with fear and disbelief. They tried to wake their father, calling out to him in desperation, but he didn't respond. Erima, on her way home from work, noticed the somber mood in her compound and felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. As she approached her family, she saw her mother and siblings huddled together, their faces contorted with grief. What happened? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother turned to her, tears streaming down her face. It's your father, Erima. She choked out, he's gone. Erima's heart stopped as the weight of her mother's words sank in. Her father, the pillar of their family, was no more. She rushed to his side, her hands shaking as she tried to wake him up, promising to work even harder if he would just wake up. But it was of no use. Mr. Okpanko was gone, leaving behind a shattered family and a community plunged into mourning. Neighbors gathered around, offering words of sympathy and comfort, but their words fell on deaf ears as the family grappled with the enormity of their loss. In the days that followed, Erima and her family leaned on each other for support, drawing strength from their love and unity in the face of adversity. Though their hearts were heavy with grief, they knew that together they would find a way to honor their father's memory and carry on his legacy of resilience and determination. After the loss of Mr. Okpanku, the family faced many difficult days. With the help of their friends and relatives, they gave him a respectful burial and returned to the city to rebuild their lives. Erima, always the pillar of strength for her family, stayed by her mother's side, offering comfort and support in their time of grief. Months passed, and as the family tried to piece their lives back together, they faced yet another setback. Erima, eager to resume her job and contribute to her family's finances, was devastated to learn that she had been replaced. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with her boss to reconsider, but he remained unmoved by her pleas. Heartbroken, Erima returned home to break the news to her family. Her mother, Ufoma, gathered her children close, her heart heavy with worry. "Don't lose hope, my dear," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We will find a way through this together." But their troubles were far from over. The next morning, a loud knock on their door jolted them awake from their restless sleep. It was their landlord, his face twisted with anger as he demanded the rent payment. Their hearts sank as they realized that their rent had expired the same month their father had passed away. It had been 3 months since his death, and they still didn't have the money to pay. Ufoma pleaded with the landlord for mercy, her voice choked with tears. "Please, sir, have pity on us," she begged. "We are still grieving the loss of my husband. Give us a little more time and we'll find a way to pay." The landlord's expression softened slightly at Ufoma's words, but his resolve remained firm. "Tell me the exact date you will have the money," he demanded, his voice stern. Erima stepped forward, her chin held high, despite the fear and uncertainty gnawing at her insides. "Next month, sir," she said, her voice steady. "By the end of next month, we'll have the rent ready for you." With a curt nod, the landlord turned and left, leaving the family to grapple with the daunting task ahead. Ufoma collapsed into tears, her children gathering around her to offer comfort and reassurance. Erima wrapped her arms around her mother, her heart heavy with worry but determined to stay strong for her family. "We will find a way, Mama," she whispered, her voice filled with conviction. "We will get through this together, no matter what." Determined to find a way to raise the rent money for their home, Erima sought out a new job with the help of their neighbor. She found a work as a cleaner in the mornings and supplemented her income by frying akara bean cakes in the evenings. Every day, Erima worked tirelessly, scrubbing floors and frying akara with skill and determination. She knew that every penny she earned brought her family one step closer to keeping a roof over their heads. One evening, as Erima tended to her frying pan in front of their compound, a sleek car pulled up and stopped in front of her. Startled, Erima rushed over to see what the driver wanted. "Give me akara worth 2,000 naira and bread worth 1,000 naira. the man in the car said, his voice commanding. Erima's heart fluttered with excitement, and she quickly packed his order, eager to make a sale. She handed the food to the man, who in turn gave her some money. As Erima counted the money, her eyes widened in disbelief. The man had given her 5,000 naira instead of the 3,000 naira she was owed. Wait, sir, Erima called out, her heart racing as she realized the mistake. You overpaid me. It's only 3,000 naira. The man smiled warmly at her, his eyes twinkling with kindness. I know, he replied. Consider it a tip for your hard work and dedication. Erima's heart swelled with gratitude, and she thanked the man profusely for his generosity. She watched as he drove off into the night, his act of kindness leaving a lasting impression on her heart. After finishing her evening sales, Erima couldn't stop talking about the stranger who had shown her such unexpected kindness. She marveled at the way a simple act of generosity had brightened her day and lifted her spirits, reminding her that even in the darkest of times, there is still goodness and light to be found in the world. As she tucked herself into bed that night, Erima felt a renewed sense of hope and determination coursing through her veins. With the memory of the stranger's kindness guiding her, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, strength, and unwavering faith in the goodness of humanity. The following day, just as Erima was setting up her frying station, the man from the sleek car returned. Like clockwork, he placed his order for bean cakes and bread, his presence becoming a familiar sight in Erima's daily routine. Each time he visited, he would give Erima a generous tip, his smile warm and his demeanor kind. Erima found herself looking forward to his visits, grateful for the extra money and the company. One day, as Erima handed him his order, she mustered the courage to strike up a conversation. Excuse me, sir, she began attentively. I was just wondering, who are you? The man smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners with amusement. My name is Alex, he replied simply. Just a regular guy who enjoys good food and good company. But Erima couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to Alex than met the eye. There was an air of mystery about him, a sense that he was hiding something beneath his charming facade. As their conversation began more frequent, Erima couldn't help but wonder about Alex's life outside of their brief encounters. Who was he, really, and what was he doing here? Unknown to Erima, Alex harbored secrets of his own. He was the son of a wealthy entrepreneur, his family's fortune built on a vast empire of businesses both in Nigeria and abroad. But despite his privileged upbringing, Alex was the proverbial black sheep of the family. His father had refused to give him any assets until he settled down and got married, a prospect that Alex found distasteful. Determined to live life on his own terms, Alex embarked on a quest to find a woman he could manipulate into marriage, someone who would give him the control he craved without the burden of love or affection. And so, when he stumbled upon Erima, a humble girl from the streets, Alex saw an opportunity. He kept his true intentions hidden, masquerading as a friendly customer while secretly plotting to make Erima his unwitting pawn in his game of deception. As their interaction continued, Erima couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something off about Alex. Despite his charm and generosity, there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a sense that he was not to be trusted. But for now, Erima pushed aside her doubts, content to enjoy Alex's company and the extra money he brought with him. Little did she know, the true nature of their relationship would soon be revealed, with far-reaching consequences for them both. As the deadline set by the landlord loomed closer, Erima's anxiety reached new heights. Despite her tireless efforts, she still hadn't been able to raise the rent money, and the thought of losing their home weighed heavily on her heart. Unable to sleep that night, Erima tossed and turned, her thoughts consumed by worry and fear. Then, in the quiet of the night, a thought suddenly struck her. What if she asked Alex for help? The next day, as Alex returned once again to buy bean cakes and bread, Erima mustered up the courage to confide in him. Alex, she began, I need your help. We are in danger of losing our home, and I don't know what to do. Alex smiled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Of course, Erima, I will help you, but on one condition. Erima's heart skipped a beat as she waited anxiously for Alex to reveal his condition. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex leaned in closer, his expression serious. Marry me, he said simply, and I will take care of everything for you and for your family. Erima's eyes widened in shock at Alex's proposal. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Marry him, a man she barely knew, who had appeared out of nowhere with offers of help and generosity. Why? She asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. But Alex simply shrugged, his smile never faltering. Does it matter? He replied. All that matters is that I can help you, Erima. Unless, of course, you don't want my help. Erima felt her head spinning as she struggled to process Alex's words. If she refused his offer, they would lose their home and be forced to face an uncertain future. But if she agreed to marry him, she would be entering into a marriage of convenience with a man she didn't love or even know. As Alex drove away that evening, leaving Erima to grapple with her decision, she knew that she faced an impossible choice. She couldn't sleep that night, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead and the consequences of her decisions. In the darkness of her room, Erima prayed for guidance, searching for the strength and wisdom to make the right choice for herself and for her family. But as the night wore on, she realized that there were no easy answers, only difficult decisions and the courage to face them head on. The next day, Alex was absent, leaving Erima to wrestle with her decision in solitude. He had left her his business card, a tangible reminder of the choice she was about to make, along with a stern warning not to call unless she was ready to say yes. Feeling torn and anxious, Erima reached out to her best friend Anna, seeking advice and solace. With a heavy heart, She confided in Anna about Alex's proposal and the overwhelming pressure she felt to accept it for the sake of her family. Anna listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. Erima, you can't just marry someone you barely know, she urged. What about love? What about happiness? But Erima, her mind already made up, couldn't shake off the weight of responsibility that lay heavy on her shoulders. Anna, I don't have a choice, she replied sadly. My family needs me, and this might be the only way to save our home. Anna's heart ached for her friend, knowing the difficult decision she was about to make. But despite her protests, Erima remained resolute in her decision, determined to sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of her family. That night, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, Erima dialed Alex's number, her stomach churning with nerves. I'm ready, she whispered into the phone, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex's response was immediate, his voice filled with satisfaction. You have made the right choice, Erima, he said smugly. I will take care of everything. The following day, Alex returned to make his intention known to Erima's mother, Ufoma. As he left, Ufoma pulled Erima aside, her eyes filled with concern and disappointment. Why didn't you tell me about this? She demanded, her voice tinged with hurt. Do you even like this man? Or are you just going along with it because of her family situation? Irima felt a pang of guilt at her mother's words, but she pushed aside her doubt, clinging to the belief that she was doing what was best for her family. I love Alex, Mama, she replied, her voice unsteady but determined. And he loves me too. Everything will be fine, you will see. But Ofoma, wise to the ways of the world, saw through her daughter's facade. Erima, marriage is a serious commitment, she cautioned. Don't rush into it without thinking about the consequences. Erima nodded, her heart heavy with uncertainty, but her resolve unwavering. I won't, Mama, she promised. I will make sure everything works out for the best. As the wedding day approached, preparations kicked into high gear, with Anna by Erima's side every step of the way. Erima felt a mix of emotions, excitement at the thought of starting a new chapter in her life, but also a gnawing sense of unease that she couldn't quite shake off. Meanwhile, Alex remained aloof, his presence felt only through the occasional transfer of money to Erima's family. Despite his apparent generosity, Erima couldn't help but feel a sense of disquiet about their impending marriage. In the days leading up to the marriage, Alex went above and beyond to ensure Erima's family's comfort and security. He rented a spacious four-room apartment for them in the heart of Lagos, started a business for Ufoma, and sent her siblings to the best schools money can afford. Erima couldn't deny that her family's newfound prosperity brought her a sense of happiness, but deep down, she knew that it came at a steep price. On the day of the wedding, Erima plastered on a smile and played the part of the blushing bride, even though her heart was heavy with doubt and regret. Their family and friends gathered to celebrate the union, their cheers masking the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. But as the ceremony progressed, Erima's facade began to crack. Overwhelmed by the weight of her decision, she rushed to the restroom to escape the suffocating pressure. Alone in the quiet sanctuary of the restroom, Erima allowed herself to succumb to her tears, her regret washing over her like a tidal wave. She cursed herself for making such a rash decision, for sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of her family's security. But before she could gather herself, Alex's icy voice cut through the silence, sending a chill down her spine. "Why did you run off like that?" he demanded, his tone sharp and menacing. Erima remained silent, her heart pounding with fear as she braced herself for his wrath. But when Alex's hand closed around her throat, squeezing tightly, she knew that her worst fears had come true. "Don't you dare embarrass me," he hissed, his grip tightening with each word. "You belong to me now, and you will behave accordingly." With tears streaming down her face, Erima nodded obediently, her spirit broken by the cruel reality of her situation. She wiped away her tears, forced a smile onto her trembling lips, and returned to the reception, knowing that she had sealed her fate with a single irreversible decision. As the wedding festivities continued around her, Erima couldn't shake off the feeling that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But with her future now bound to Alex's, there was no turning back, no escape from the prison of her own making. After the lavish wedding, Erima found herself thrust into a new life, a life that felt more like a prison than the happily ever after she had dreamed of. They moved into Alex's opulent mansion, but instead of feeling like a queen, Erima felt like a prisoner in her own home. Alex wasted no time asserting his dominance over Erima, ordering the maid to separate her belongings and relegating her to a different room without explanation. When Erima dared to question his actions, Alex's response was swift and brutal, a harsh slap across her face, a stark reminder of her place in his world. Tears streaming down her cheeks, Erima retreated to her room, her heart heavy with despair. She had hoped that marriage would bring her happiness and security, but instead, it had become a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. The next morning, Erima was jolted awake by the sound of Alex's voice, his tone cold and commanding. Without a moment's hesitation, he slapped her awake, his words dripping with disdain. "Why are you still sleeping, you poor thing?" he sneered. "Get up and start your chores. I want my breakfast ready by 7 a.m. and make sure you are presentable while you are at it." Erima, trembling with fear and confusion, dared to ask Alice why he was being so cruel, but his response was as callous as ever, a chilling reminder of the power he held over her. "You belong to me," he spat, his voice laced with malice, "and I will do with you as I please." From that day forward, life at Alex's mansion became a living nightmare for Erima. She was treated more like a servant than a wife, forced to toil from dawn to dusk, enduring Alex's wrath with every step she took. If Anna or Ufoma called to check on her, Erima would lie through her tears, putting on a brave front to shield them from the harsh reality of her situation. She prayed fervently for Alex to change, for their marriage to become the loving partnership she had always dreamed of. But with each passing day, her hope dwindled, replaced by a suffocating sense of despair. Alex's cruelty knew no bounds. He would berate her for the slightest mistake, his words cutting like knives, his fists raining down on her with merciless force. And yet, amidst the pain and the fear, Erima clung to a silver of hope, praying for a miracle to set her free from the prison of her own making. As the months dragged on, Erima's life became a living hell at the hands of Alex. His cruelty knew no bounds. She endured relentless beatings, collapsed from the pain, and bore the bruises and injuries inflicted on her with silent agony. But despite the physical and emotional toll, Erima remained trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. One day, unable to bear the torment any longer, Erima mustered the courage to confront Alex about his cruelty, but her defiance only fueled his rage, and he unleashed his fury upon her with even greater ferocity, leaving her battered and broken on the floor. To add insult to injury, Alex brazenly brought other women into their matrimonial home, flaunting his infidelity without remorse. Erima, powerless to stop him, could only watch in silence, her spirit crushed under the weight of his tyranny. Desperate for help, Erima reached out to her best friend Anna, confiding in her about the horrors she endured behind closed doors. But before she could finish her plea for help, Alex overheard her and unleashed his wrath upon her once again, seizing her phone and locking her away in a room, cutting her off from the outside. Alarmed by Erima's distress call, Anna wasted no time in seeking help from Ufoma, Erima's mother. Together, they rushed to Alex's mansion, their hearts heavy with fear for Erima's safety. Upon arrival, they were met with a chilling sight. The mansion quiet, with no sign of Alex or Erima. Frantic, they turned to the maid for answers, only to learn that Alex had left town, leaving Erima locked away in her prison of despair. Without hesitation, Anna and Ufoma sprang into action, determined to rescue Erima from her tormentor's clutches. With sheer determination, they broke down the door to the room where Erima was imprisoned, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. As they rushed Erima to the hospital, her body battered and bruised, she found solace in finally being free from Alex's grip. Through tears and pain, she recounted the horrors she had endured, vowing never to return to that house of horrors again. With Ufoma's unwavering support and Anna's steadfast friendship, Erima began to rebuild her shattered life, finding strength in the love and compassion of those who stood by her side. And as she looked to the future, she knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, she would never again allow herself to be silenced or subdued by fear. Few weeks later, Erima found herself caught in a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. When Alex returned and learned of what had transpired in his absence, his facade of contrition was but a thin veil over his true nature, a heart consumed by cruelty and malice. With feigned remorse, he approached Ufoma, Erima's mother, with hollow promises of change, hoping to manipulate her into believing that he was a changed man. Ufoma, burdened by the weight of responsibility for her family's welfare, felt torn between her daughter's safety and the looming threat of Alex's wrath. With a heavy heart, She urged Erima to return to Alice and give him another chance, fearing the consequences of defying him. But deep down, she knew that her daughter deserved better, that no one should have to endure the torment inflicted by a man consumed by his own demons. Reluctantly, Erima agreed to return to the mansion, her heart heavy with apprehension and dread. She prayed fervently that Alex would keep to his word, that he would refrain from unleashing his violent temper upon her once more. But her hopes were dashed when, within days of her return, Alex's facade crumbled, revealing the true extent of his cruelty. In a fit of rage, he unleashed his fury upon Erima, his blows raining down upon her with merciless force. She cried out in pain, her body battered and bruised, as she fought to endure the onslaught of his wrath. But amidst the chaos and the pain, a flicker of defiance ignited within her, a determination to break free from the chains that bound her to this house of horrors. Thankfully, Anna, ever vigilant, rushed to Erima's aid, her unwavering support serving as a beacon of hope in the darkness. Together they fled the mansion, seeking refuge in the safety of the outside world. With Anna's guiding hand, Erima found herself in the hospital, her injuries tended to with care and compassion. As she lay in her hospital bed, her body racked with pain, Erima made a solemn vow to herself to never again allow herself to be subjected to the tyranny of Alex's reign. With a steely resolve, she resolved to seek justice for the crimes he had committed against her. Armed with the evidence she had secretly recorded, Erima bravely stepped forward and pressed charges against Alex, determined to hold him accountable for his actions. And as the wheels of justice began to turn, Alex was arrested. His reign of terror finally brought to an end. But the road to freedom was not without its challenges. As Erima navigated the legal process, she found herself confronted by doubts and fears, haunted by the memories of the horrors she had endured. But with the unwavering support of her family and friends, she found the strength to persevere, knowing that justice would soon be served. In the end, it was Alex's own father who came to Erima's rescue, appalled by his son's actions and determined to right the wrongs he had committed. With his help, Erima was able to break free from the shackles of her past, reclaiming her life and her future. As she looked back on the journey she had traveled, Erima couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far she had come. Through the darkest of times, she had found the courage to stand up for herself, to fight for justice, and to reclaim her freedom. And as she stepped confidently into the future, her heart filled with hope and determination, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them head on, with courage and grace. For she was Erima, a survivor, a warrior, and a beacon of hope for all who had suffered in silence. The moral lesson from this story is that patience is a powerful virtue, and making impulsive decisions can lead to grave consequences. Erima's journey teaches us the importance of remaining patient in the face of adversity, even when things seem hopeless. Furthermore, the story emphasizes the importance of prioritizing one's safety and well-being above all else. Erima's decision to leave her marriage, despite the threat and intimidation from her husband, demonstrates the importance of recognizing when a situation becomes life-threatening and taking action to protect oneself. In doing so, Erima shows us the strength and courage it takes to walk away from a toxic situation and start anew. In the busy city of Ibadan, a lively city filled with the sounds of laughter and the hustle of daily life, there lived a girl who faced a tragedy that changed her life forever. It was the loss of her beloved parents. Young Sarah's world was turned upside down and she found herself navigating through life without her parents at a very tender age of 10. Her parents, who had been her world, were suddenly taken from her in a tragic accident. It happened that on one fateful day, Sarah's parents were involved in a terrible car accident. Despite the efforts of the doctors and nurses, they could not be saved. Her parents, who had gone too soon, left her with nothing but memories and a world of uncertainty. The loss of her mom and dad left a void in her heart. As young Sarah's world was turned upside down, left with no one to care for her, Sarah found herself alone in the world, her young heart heavy with grief and sorrows. As Sarah sat on the warm out sofa in their living room, her eyes filled with curiosity and wanting to ask her aunt a question, she said tearfully, "But Aunt Rebecca, what happened to my mom and dad? Why did they have to go?" Aunt Rebecca sighed, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know it's hard to understand, but your mom and dad were taken from us too soon there," she replied, her soft voice shaky and teary, but she held on, knowing she was trying to comfort her niece, and she doesn't want her to see her in that state. But we must cherish the memories we have of them and find strength in each other as they are in a better place now, Aunt Rebecca said. Sarah nodded, her young heart heavy with grief and sorrow, and she won't be seeing her parents again. Amidst the chaos and sorrow, Sarah's aunt Rebecca emerged as a beacon of hope. Despite her own struggles to make ends meet, Aunt Rebecca stepped in to provide solace and care to the grieving girl. Sarah clung to her aunt's comforting words, finding comfort in the thought that her parents were still with her in spirit. As Sarah settled into her new home with Aunt Rebecca, the pain of her loss lingered like a shadow. She longed for the comforting embrace of her parents, their laughter echoing in her memories like distant echoes. Though the pain of loss lingered, Aunt Rebecca's love provided a glimmer of light in the darkness. Sarah's aunt, with her gentle smile and soothing words, became a beacon of hope in Sarah's darkened world, and Sarah found solace in Aunt Rebecca's unwavering love. The bond between them started growing stronger with each passing day, and though the pain of her loss never truly faded, Sarah began to find moments of joy and laughter amidst the warmth of her new family. And so, in the bustling city of Ibadan, amidst the ebb and flow of life, Sarah found a new home and a new family in the loving embrace of her aunt Rebecca. Little does she know that this was just the beginning of her journey, filled with twists and turns yet to come. Sarah's journey began, a journey of love, loss, and the unwavering bond between a niece and her aunt. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Sarah adjusted to her new life under Aunt Rebecca's care. Despite the struggles of making ends meet, Aunt Rebecca poured her heart and soul into providing for Sarah, ensuring that she lacked absolutely nothing. Aunt Rebecca, tenderly and softly, would always say to Sarah, "You are my precious girl, Sarah. I will always be here for you no matter what." Aunt Rebecca took Sarah in and they lived happily together. Sarah, on her own path, was always up and doing. She did all the house chores, helped Aunt Rebecca with going to the market to sell her foodstuffs. Indeed, Sarah was a blessing to Aunt Rebecca's household, as everyone who came across Sarah loved her. Aside from being up and doing, Sarah was so respectful and well mannered. As time went on, Aunt Rebecca called Sarah and told her plans of enrolling her to school. Indeed, it was one of the best days of Sarah's life, as she had always been anticipating going back to school. Thank you so much, Auntie. I really appreciate. Sarah said as she gave her Aunt Rebecca a hug. Aunt Rebecca, in response, said, "You are always welcome, my precious girl. You deserve everything good, and I will do anything possible to see you get it." Sarah looked at her aunt, tears coming down from her cheeks, speechless as to what to say to her aunt, gave her another warm hug and said, "God bless you, aunt." Sarah gotten admitted into her new school. She did so well that at the end of every third term, she usually got lots of gifts from her teachers in regards to her excellent performance in school. Sarah, rushing home to show her aunt her results, said, "Auntie, Auntie, Auntie Rebecca," who was inside the house, hurried outside to know what was going on with her niece. "I came first in my class again, Auntie," Sarah said with lots of happiness as she handed her result booklet to her aunt. "Oh, my precious little girl, you have brought us pure joy since you arrived into this house. I'm so proud of you, my sweet girl," Aunt Rebecca replied as she was seen smiling going through Sarah's result booklet. "Let's go in," Aunt Rebecca said. "I will definitely get you a gift for this excellent result of yours." "Yay! Thank you, Auntie," Sarah said excitedly as she went into her room to change and come help her aunt with selling her foodstuffs at the market. As time went on, Sarah did so well that she graduated from primary school as the best student. Of course, it was time for the secondary school aspect. She didn't allow her bad peer pressure to get to her. Instead, she stayed focused and kept doing well. Due to her academic excellence, Sarah was made the head girl of the school in her SS2. Most students loved her as she was down to earth irrespective of her being the head girl. She helped students with their assignments and other things they found wanting. All teachers loved her because she was down to earth and really a loving person. One day, a dark cloud descended upon Aunt Rebecca's household as her husband fell ill. With each passing day, his condition worsened and the medical bills kept piling up. There was no more means to pay them as Aunt Rebecca had already exhausted all her savings from her food business money and didn't know what else to do. Aunt Rebecca felt helpless. Her heart was heavy with worry and despair as she was unable to come out with a plan to raise money to help her dying husband. Aunt Rebecca, who had borrowed money from her friends and couldn't pay back, came back to Nkechi, her close friend, and said, "Please, borrow me another money. Before the end of the month, I will definitely pay you back." Nkechi said to her, "Rebecca, my dear, all the other money I have been borrowing you, I haven't seen any of them, and here you are, asking that I borrow you another one. Do you think I plug money from trees?" Nkechi said, "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I no longer have any money to dash you for free." Rebecca felt like the ground should open and swallow her, as she felt like she had failed her husband. Aunt Rebecca knew she had to do something as soon as possible to save her husband's life. In her desperation, Aunt Rebecca made her way through the crowded streets of Ibadan. She knew that there was only one person in the city who could provide the assistance she needed. It was Madame Victoria, the formidable woman who ran the notorious brothel known for its cruelty. Madame Victoria was known far and wide for her ruthless business dealings and the harsh treatment of those who crossed her path. Gathering her courage, Aunt Rebecca approached Madame Victoria's establishment, her heart pounding with fear and uncertainty as she pleaded for help. Her hands were equally trembling with anxiety. as she stood before the imposing figure of Madame Victoria. Her voice quivered as she made her plea. Please, Madame Victoria, I beg of you. My husband is seriously ill, and I have no means to pay for his treatment. I'm desperate as it stands now. I need your help, ma, with the sum of 2 million naira for his surgery. Please, is there anything you can do to help us? Aunt Rebecca said tearfully. Madam Victoria, known for her sharp tongue and merciless demeanor, regarded Aunt Rebecca with a cold stare. Her eyes seemed to pierce through Aunt Rebecca's soul as she considered the desperate woman before her. I can lend you the money you need, but you must understand that nothing comes for free in this world. If I'm to help you, you must be willing to offer me something of value in return. Aunt Rebecca's heart sank as she realized the gravity of Madame Victoria's words. She knew that agreeing to Madame Victoria's terms would come at a great cost, but the thought of losing her husband was unbearable. She knew what Madame Victoria was asking for, something precious, something that she held there, but being faced with the looming shadow of her husband's illness, Aunt Rebecca had no choice but to agree. Madame Victoria gave her conditions, and the condition was Sarah, Aunt Rebecca's beloved niece. I will lend you the money, but only if Sarah becomes collateral. You must understand, Rebecca, that business is business, said Madame Victoria. Tearfully, Aunt Rebecca agreed to Madame Victoria's terms, knowing that it was the only way to save her husband's life. She promised herself that she would return for Sarah as soon as she could, praying that it would be soon. With a heavy heart, Aunt Rebecca returned home, clutching the borrowed money in her trembling hands. She knew that her decision would come at a great cost, but she had no choice if she wanted to save her husband's life. As she entered their home, Sarah's innocent eyes widened with curiosity and concern. Sarah, looking all confused and scared at the sight of seeing her aunt the way she was, said, Aunt Rebecca, what's wrong? Why do you look so sad? Oh, it's nothing, Sarah. Just some grown up problems. You don't need to worry about it. Aunt Rebecca said, forcing a smile. But Sarah could sense that something was wrong. She watched as Aunt Rebecca paced back and forth with worry. After some minutes, Aunt Rebecca broke the silence and called out to Sarah, Sarah, my love, please come and sit by my side. I need to tell you something important. Sarah, slowly coming to sit next to her, as she knew the cat was about to be let out of the bag. Yes, auntie, what's the problem? She said. Aunt Rebecca, filled with lots of sad emotion, said, You'll be going to Madame Victoria's place to stay for the time being, my dear. Aunt Rebecca, why do I have to go with Madame Victoria? What's happening? Sarah asked. Aunt Rebecca's heart broke at the sound of Sarah's innocent question. She knew she couldn't hide the truth from her any longer. It's because I needed to borrow money to help your uncle get better. Madam Victoria agreed to lend me the money, but only if you become collateral. Aunt Rebecca said tearfully. Sarah's eyes widened with fear and confusion. She couldn't understand why she had to leave her home and go with Madam Victoria. It's just for a little while there. I promise I will come back for you. Please trust me. Aunt Rebecca said, as she was filled with emotions, white tears dropping down her eyes. But Aunt Rebecca, why do I have to go? Can't we find another way to help Uncle without me leaving? Sarah said, with her voice trembling with fear. Aunt Rebecca's heart shattered at Sarah's question one more time. She wished with all her heart that there was another way, but she knew that time was running out and they had no other option. I'm sorry, Sarah. Nothing can be done at this point. But I promise, it's just for a little while. I will come back for you as soon as your uncle gets better. Please, trust me. Sarah nodded. Although she was young, she could sense the fear and uncertainty in her auntie's voice. But she trusted Aunt Rebecca with all her heart and believed that she would keep her promise. But the thought of leaving her home and going with Madame Victoria filled her with dread and so much sorrow. And so, with tearful goodbyes and heavy hearts, Aunt Rebecca watched as Sarah was taken away by Madame Victoria at the age of 17, knowing that She had made a sacrifice that would haunt her for years to come. But in that moment, all she could think about was saving her husband's life, praying that it would be worth the heartbreaking bargain she had made. And so, as Sarah was laid away to Madame Victoria's brothel, Aunt Rebecca hoped that one day they would be reunited and their family would be whole once again. As the years passed, Sarah found herself weighed down by the burdens of life at Madame Victoria's brothel. With each passing day, the hope of Aunt Rebecca's return grew dimmer, and the weight of her absence pressed down on Sarah's heart like a heavy stone. Forced to work at Madame Victoria's brothel, Sarah's life became a relentless cycle of hardship and sorrow, each day blurred into the next, as she endured the cruel demands of Madame Victoria and the harsh realities of her life, her young spirit slowly being crushed under the weight of her circumstances. In the dimly lit confines of the brothel, Sarah toiled away, her days filled with tasks too burdensome for a 17-year-old. She scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and tended to the needs of Madame Victoria's clients, all the while longing for the warmth and comfort of her aunt's embrace. Madame Victoria, when will Aunt Rebecca come for me? As she promised she would, Sarah asked. With a cruel laugh, Madame Victoria answered, She has forgotten about you, girl. You belong to me now. Aunt Rebecca made her choice, and now you are mine. Sarah's heart sank at Madame Victoria's words, realizing that Aunt Rebecca may never come for her. The pain of betrayal cut deep, and she struggled to come to terms with the harsh reality of her situation. In that moment, she realized that Aunt Rebecca's promise had been nothing but empty words, a cruel deception that had left her alone and abandoned in a world filled with darkness and despair. Despite the darkness and harshness of her circumstances, Sarah hoped deep within her heart. She refused to believe that Aunt Rebecca had truly forgotten about her, holding on to the memories of their time together with unwavering determination that surrounded her. Sarah held to the memories of her life before the brothel, the love of her parents, the warmth of Aunt Rebecca's care. They were the lights that guided her through the darkest of times, reminding her that she was more than just a commodity to be bought and sold. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Sarah's resilience grew stronger, her spirit refusing to be broken by the cruelty of her surroundings. Though she faced endless hardship and sorrow, she found solace in the small moments of kindness that shined like stars in the darkest of her life. Each day became a battle of survival as Sarah navigated the dangerous world of the brothel, longing for the comfort and security of her aunt's embrace. But as the years passed, hope began to fade, replaced by resignation and acceptance of her fate. And so, amidst the harsh reality of life at Madame Victoria's brothel, Sarah held on to hope that one day Aunt Rebecca would come for her and that she would find a way to escape her life of hardship and sorrow, sweeping her away from the darkness and into the light of a new beginning. Little did she know, the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and obstacles, testing her strength and resolve in ways she could never have imagined. Sarah's days at Madame Victoria's brothel were filled with endless toil and despair. On a fateful Friday evening, as Madame Victoria sat all alone in her room thinking of ways to make more money, an idea came to her mind. Sarah is 18 years already, she said. She will be able to do things other young girls are doing to make me more money, as her aunt couldn't come to clear her debt. I think she has passed the age of cleaning and serving. I need to add her to the list of hookers in order to make me more money, she thought out aloud. Hence, Madame Victoria decided to upgrade Sarah's rank from the girl who used to be a cleaner and do other chores to a hooker. One day, as Sarah sat alone in the courtyard of Madame Victoria's brothel, lost in her thoughts, she felt a tap on her back. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. Madame Victoria had been the one shouting her name all this while, but Sarah was deeply lost in thought, thinking of ways she could escape the brothel. Yes, ma, she answered. I have decided that you will no longer be working as a cleaner at my brothel again. Sarah looked at her immediately, not sure if it was good news or an arrival or something bad. But you'll be working as one of my hookers, Madam Victoria said to Sarah. What? A hooker? Sarah said in amazement as she was burst into tears. This is not the life I want. No, this is not the life I dreamed of. Oh my God, what's all this? Sarah said, tears rolling down her eyes. Quiet, girl, Madam Victoria replied as she looked at Sarah with a look of contempt. Your aunt still owes me a huge sum amount of money and has not come to pay ever since then. So you have to fill in for her and pay the debt she was unable to pay me. Sarah's heart sank at Madam Victoria's words, realizing that escape may be more difficult than she had ever imagined. Each attempt of Sarah's to leave was met with further demand for money, making escape seem like an impossible dream, leaving Sarah trapped in a cycle of false hope and despair. The walls of the brothel seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with the weight of her captivity. With each failed attempt, Sarah's hope dwindled, replaced by a sense of resignation and despair. She had no other choice than to compel to Madame Victoria's command so that she could save up more money and leave the brothel as soon as she could. Despite the harsh reality of her situation, she held on to hope, the hope of escape. Determined to break free from Madame Victoria's clutches, Sarah accepted to be one of Madame Victoria's hookers. Sarah's world seemed dark and suffocating, trapped in Madame Victoria's brothel. Her days stretched on endlessly, each one feeling more hopeless than the last. In order to enable her make more money for Madame Victoria, so she can leave the brothel as soon as she can, Sarah started her work the next day as a hooker. Sleeping with men and being paid was now her new job. Each night, as she lay in her cold, cramped room, Sarah counted the money she had made for the day and submitted to Madame Victoria in order to enable her debt to keep reducing. While the little change she had made, she kept it in a secret hiding place, dreaming of the day could finally leave the brothel behind and start a new life. With each little money she added to her savings, her dreams of freedom grew stronger. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, even months into years, but still Sarah kept working at the brothel as a hooker. After a particular job on a Saturday evening, Sarah came into her room as usual to check her savings and know her progress. To her greatest surprise, she had raised lots of money from her little changes she had been saving for years now, coupled with the fact that she equally gave most shares to Madame Victoria after each day's job. I will go to Madame Victoria first thing tomorrow morning to tell her I have completed her money, Sarah said. She was so excited that night that she could barely sleep. I can't wait to see Aunt Rebecca again, Sarah thought to herself and smiled. Not long after, she dozed off to sleep. As soon as she woke up, Sarah hurriedly went to Madame Victoria's lounge to go look for her. Knock, knock, she said. Is anyone home? Sarah said, as she was excited to let Madame Victoria know she had saved the 10 million naira her aunt borrowed. Though her aunt borrowed 2 million naira, but Madame Victoria lied to her that it was 10 million naira. Who is that? Come in, Mrs. Victoria said with her high-pitched voice. Sarah entered in, shaking and not knowing the exact words to use or say. I, she muttered as she was terrified because of the cold gaze Madame Victoria gave her. Speak up, or you leave my room, Madame Victoria said to Sarah. Sarah, shaking and filled with so much anxiety, said, I have saved up enough money, Madame Victoria. Can I leave now? Please, I just want to go home. Sarah said to Madame Victoria, You owe me more than you can ever repay, girl. You will never leave here. Madame Victoria replied as she looked at Sarah with a look of contempt. Hearing Madame Victoria say these words shattered Sarah the more. How do I get the extra 20 million naira Madame Victoria is asking I pay? Who do I run to? What will I do now? She said to herself as tears ran down her cheeks. Despite her best efforts, Madame Victoria seemed determined to keep her trapped in the brothel, using every means at her disposal to maintain her control. No matter how much she saved, it seemed like she would never be able to buy her freedom. Madame Victoria's hold on her was too strong and her demands too relentless as she kept multiplying the interest attached to the money to enable Sarah not to be able to pay her. But despite the odds stacked against her, Sarah refused to give up, knowing that somewhere out there freedom awaited her. And so, with each passing day, she continued to save. With determination burning in her heart, she vowed to continue fighting for her freedom no matter the cost. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult and filled with danger, but she refused to let fear hold her back. It was a Friday night, and as usual, everyone was expected to work. So all the hookers went to their various destinations to meet their clients. Sarah was not exempted as well. The following morning, as Sarah was preparing to go back to the house, she found a wallet on the floor. It happened to be the wallet of a guy who had lodged in the hotel the previous night. Inside the wallet was an ID card and some amount of money in it. Sarah quickly brought out the ID card and called the number on it. A young man picked the call and she introduced herself, telling him the reason for her call. The young man was in complete shock as she couldn't believe that someone could pick up his wallet and call him to return it. He was in complete shock. They agreed on a place to meet so he can collect the wallet back. He thanked her and told her that he was on his way there. On getting to the location, he saw Sarah and said to her, "Hey, mind if I join you?" Sarah looked up, surprised by the sudden intrusion. She had grown accustomed to being ignored or scorned by those around her, and Peter's kindness caught her off guard. Sure, I guess, Sarah said hesitantly. As Peter sat down beside her, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She had learned to keep her guard up around strangers, wary of their intentions. But as she looked into Peter's eyes, she sensed a sincerity that she hadn't encountered in a long time. Hi, I'm Peter by name. I couldn't introduce myself properly when you called. I'm equally a businessman who specializes in trading of goods. What's your name and what is it that you do for a living? Peter asked Sarah. I'm Sarah by name, she said. Oh, such a lovely name, Peter said. Okay, Sarah, what do you do for a living? Peter asked again. Sarah smiled and said to him, This is your wallet you dropped. Here you go, and stood up to leave. Thank you for the drinks, Sarah said as she handed over the wallet to him and went off. Peter, on the other hand, opened the wallet and to his greatest surprise, nothing was missing from it. Who is this girl? He asked himself as he was confused and curious as to why a hooker would see a wallet filled with money and not attempt removing even one. He was impressed. He knew that whatever that made Sarah a hooker had more to it, so he decided there to monitor her whereabouts. On one fateful evening, Peter followed Sarah home without her knowing he was following her. He wanted to know more about her. To her greatest surprise, someone tapped her back and it was Peter. What are you doing here? She asked. Do you want my madam to punish me? Sarah asked, looking all confused as to not knowing what to say to him anymore. Relax, Peter said. I've been monitoring your whereabouts. I wanted to know more about you as you refused telling me the other day we met. Come with me, Sarah. Let's go to a safe place so we can talk. Sarah reluctantly followed him inside his car and they went to a nearby bar to have something to eat and drink. So, Sarah, you work at a brothel as a hooker, and same you saw my wallet filled with money and made no attempt to remove even one. Instead, you traced the owner and returned it. I would really love to know more about you, Peter said as he looked at Sarah affectionately. Eventually, Sarah opened up to Peter and told him everything about how her aunt and Madame Victoria used her as collateral. After narrating her sad life experience to him, Peter, on his own part, did not know when tears started rolling down from his eyes. I will do everything in my power to make sure you leave this place, Peter said to Sarah. Thank you, Peter. They ate, drank, and had a couple of gists. When it was getting late, Peter had offered to give Sarah a ride and take her back, while they looked for a way to make sure Sarah was freed. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Still, Peter remained unwavered in his determination to free Sarah from Madame Victoria's clutches. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took to see Sarah smile again. With each passing day, Peter's determination to free Sarah from Madame Victoria's grasp only grew stronger. He knew that he couldn't stand idle doing nothing while Sarah suffered, trapped in a life she never deserved. With each passing day, Peter worked tirelessly to gather the money needed to pay off Sarah's debt to Madame Victoria. He took on extra jobs, saved every penny he could, and reached out to friends and family, explaining Sarah's plight and pleading for their help. And to his amazement, the support poured in from all corners as people rallied behind Peter's noble cause. Drawing on every resource at his disposal, Peter worked tirelessly to gather the funds needed to pay off Sarah's debt. Finally, after weeks of hard work and determination, Peter had gathered enough money to pay off Sarah's debt in full. With a sense of purpose burning in his heart, he marched straight to Madame Victoria's brothel, ready to confront the woman who had held Sarah captive for so long to free Sarah once and for all. Madame Victoria, I have come to settle Sarah's debt. Here is the money in full, Peter said with determination in his voice. Madame Victoria's eyes widened in surprise as Peter handed over the money, realizing that she could no longer hold Sarah captive. Reluctantly, she accepted the payment. Very well, but note that this changes nothing. Sarah is mine, and she will always belong to me, Madame Victoria said reluctantly, but Peter refused to back down, knowing that he held the power of love on his side. With the help of a lawyer, he forced Madame Victoria to sign an agreement releasing Sarah from her clutches once and for all. With trembling hands, Sarah signed the agreement that Madame Victoria had prepared, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. As the ink dried on the paper, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. A sense of freedom washed over Sarah like never before, knowing that she was finally free from the chains that had bound her for so long. She could hardly believe that she was finally free from the darkness that had consumed her. You are free now, Sarah. You don't belong in that place. You deserve to be happy and to live life of freedom, Peter said to Sarah with a smile on his face. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at Peter, overwhelmed with gratitude for all that he had done for her. Tears of joy filled Sarah's eyes as she embraced Peter, feeling a sense of gratitude and love unlike anything she had ever known. Thank you, Peter. I don't know how to repay you for everything you have done for me. You have given me a second chance at life, and I will never forget it. I will be forever grateful, Sarah said with her voice filled with emotions, as she was choked with emotions. But Peter shook his head, knowing that the greatest reward was seeing Sarah free and happy once again. With a sense of relief and joy coursing through her veins, Sarah took Peter's hand, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they walked out of Madame Victoria's brothel, leaving behind the darkness of the past and stepping into a future filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. With the weight of Madame Victoria's oppression lifted from her shoulders, Sarah stepped out into the world with a renewed sense of hope and determination. The sun seemed to shine brighter, and the air felt lighter as she breathed in the sweet scent of freedom. Guided by Peter's unwavering support, Sarah embarked on a journey of transformation, determined to carve out a new life for herself. With his help, she enrolled in school, eager to continue her education and pursue her dreams. Peter stood by her side every step of the way, guiding her towards a new beginning filled with endless possibilities. Together, they mapped out a plan for Sarah's future, determined to leave the darkness of the past behind and embrace the light of a brighter tomorrow. You are so brave, Sarah. I know you will do great things, Peter said with a proud smile on his face. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude as she listened to Peter's words, realizing that she was finally being given the chance to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. But Peter didn't stop there. Knowing that Sarah deserved more than just an education, he helped her find a job, guiding her through the process of interviews and resumes until he landed the position that suited her skills and interests. She looked at Peter, overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity he had shown her, alongside all his encouragement. I never thought I would have a chance at a real life again. Thank you, Peter. You have given me a hope for the future when I had none. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Sarah's confidence grew, fueled by the support and encouragement of her newfound friends and mentors. With each passing day, she felt herself becoming stronger, more resilient, and more determined to make the most of her second chance at life. But regardless of the excitement of her new beginning, Sarah never forgot where she came from or the struggle she had endured to get to where she was. She carried the memories of her past with her, a reminder of the obstacles she had overcome and the strength she had found within herself. And as she looked to the future, Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them head on, fueled by the power of love, hope, and support of those who believed in her. For in her heart, she knew that with Peter by her side, anything was possible. With tears of joy in her eyes, Sarah embraced Peter, knowing that she owed him her life in more ways than one. Peter smiled warmly at Sarah, his heart swelling with pride at her resilience and determination. Together, they walked hand in hand down the bustling streets of Ibadan, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Sarah settled into her new life, she found solace in the routine of school and her co-workers at her job. Each day brought new challenges and triumphs, but with Peter's unshaken support, she faced them with all courage and resilience. Amidst the joy of her newfound freedom, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering shadows of her past. Memories of Madame Victoria's brothel haunted her dreams, reminding her of the darkness she had escaped. Years passed, and Sarah's life blossomed in ways she never thought possible, and she had built a new life for herself with Peter by her side. She thrived in her studies and excelled in her career, becoming a shining example of resilience and determination. Together, they had faced countless challenges and overcome every obstacle that stood in their way, thereby growing stronger with each passing day. But amidst the joys of her newfound success, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering pain of her past. Despite her best effort to move forward, the memories of her time at Madame Victoria's brothel haunted her, a constant reminder of the hardship she had endured. One day, as Sarah was sorting through some old belongings, she stumbled upon a faded photograph of her Aunt Rebecca and her husband. Memories of her childhood flooded back, bringing with them a mix of emotions: love, loss, and a deep sense of longing for the family she had lost. With a heavy heart, Sarah realized that she had never truly said goodbye to her aunt, nor had she ever found closure for the pain and sorrow she had plagued her for so long. And so, with determination burning in her heart, she set out to confront the ghosts of her past and finally lay them to rest. On one fateful day, Sarah received news that her aunt Rebecca had passed away, along with her husband, leaving behind a legacy of love and loss. At first, Sarah's heart ached with grief at the news of her aunt's passing. Despite the pain of the past, she couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the woman who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to turn. "I'm here for you, Sarah. Whatever you need, I'll be by your side," Peter said comfortingly to her. Sarah nodded, grateful for Peter's unwavering support. Together, they traveled to Aunt Rebecca's hometown to pay their last respects to the woman who had played a vital role in Sarah's life. Upon arriving in her hometown, Sarah was met with mixed emotions as she visited the places of her past: the house where she had grown up, the school she had attended, and the streets she had walked as a child. Each place held a piece of her heart, a reminder of the life she had left behind and the person she had become. Aunt Rebecca may have made a mistake, but I can't hold on to anger forever. It's time to let go and find happiness, Sarah said. As they stood by Aunt Rebecca's graveside, Sarah felt a mix of emotions swelling inside her: sadness for the loss of her aunt, gratitude for the love she had shown her, and a sense of closure for the pain of her past. As Sarah knelt beside the grave, she traced her fingers over the letters carved into the stone, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "Aunt Rebecca, I hope you can hear me," Sarah said softly. "I want you to know that I have forgiven you. I forgive you for everything that happened, for the pain and suffering you caused me. I know you were struggling too, and I want to believe that you did the best you could." After saying this, Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a burden of resentment and anger that she had carried for far too long. She felt a sense of peace and closure, knowing that she had finally let go of the past and embraced forgiveness. As they were about walking away from Aunt Rebecca's grave, Sarah felt a sense of closure wash over her. knowing that she had finally made peace with the past. And as she looked to the future, she knew that she was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in the knowledge that she had the love and support of those who mattered most. Let's go, Peter. I'm ready to start the next chapter of my life, Sarah said with a sense of determination. You are so strong, Sarah. I'm proud of you, Peter said, placing a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah smiled gratefully at Peter, grateful for all his support and encouragement ever since their paths crossed. With those words, Sarah took Peter's hand, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation bubbling up inside her. Together, they stood in silence for a moment longer, soaking in the serenity of the moment before turning to leave. Sarah knew that the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns, but with Peter by her side, she was ready to face whatever came her way. Free from the dark shadows of the brothel, she left behind the shadows of her past and embraced the promise of a brighter future. Sarah stepped into a world of possibilities with Peter, guiding her and directing her. Sarah gazed at the busy streets of Ibadan, her heart brimming with gratitude towards Peter. I can't thank you enough, Peter. You have given me a second chance at life, she said. Peter smiled, his eyes reflecting her joy. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Sarah. I will always be here for you no matter what. As the seasons changed, so did Sarah's life. With her newfound education, she secured a job at a local bookstore where she immersed herself in the world of literature. Every page turned was a step closer to her dreams and a testament to her perseverance. Peter watched with pride as Sarah flourished, his heart overflowing with love for the remarkable woman she had become. Together, they shared laughter and tears, waging life storms side by side. One day, as they strode through the park hand in hand, Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. Peter, do you remember when we first met? Sarah asked. I never could have imagined the journey we would take together. Peter smiled, his heart swelling with affection. I remember it like it was yesterday, Sarah, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it. They sat inside the beautiful lounge, having a drink. Sarah, there is something I have been meaning to ask you. Peter said. What is it, Peter? Sarah asked curiously. Peter, taking a deep breath, not sure about the exact words to use, he said, Will you will you marry me, Sarah? For a moment, the world seemed to stand still as Sarah processed his words. Then, with tears in her eyes and a smile on her lips, she moved closer to him and whispered the answer he had been longing to hear. Yes, Peter, 1,000 times yes, as she said emotionally. And so, they sealed their love with a kiss, knowing that together they could conquer anything that life threw their way. As they walked home hand in hand, the promise of a brighter future beckoned, filling their hearts with hope, joy, and dreams for the future ahead. One thing was certain, the future stretched out from them, a vast landscape of endless possibilities. One lesson from this story is that no matter the circumstances, it's essential to hold on to hope and keep striving for a better future, despite facing immense challenges and being exploited by those she trusted. Sarah persevered, found love, and eventually rebuilt her life. It teaches us the importance of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love and support in overcoming adversity. Once upon a time, in the lively city of Uyo, there lived a beautiful lady named Grace. Grace was 32 years old and she had a heart as warm as the sun. She lived in a cozy house with her husband, Donald. They had been married for 5 years and their love for each other was as strong as the towering oak tree. However, there was a sadness in Grace's heart. Despite their deep love, Grace and Donald faced a challenge that made their days difficult. They didn't have any children. Grace longed to hear the pitter-patter of little feet and the sound of children's laughter filling their home. Donald had a job that kept him away from home for long periods. He had to travel far for work, leaving Grace alone for weeks at a time. Although They talked on the phone every day. Grace missed her husband terribly when he was away. One sunny morning, as Grace sat in her garden, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and birds chirped happily in the distance. She closed her eyes and dreamed of a day when she and Donald would have children of their own. She imagined their home filled with laughter and joy, with children playing happily in every corner. Suddenly, Grace heard a voice calling her name. She opened her eyes to see her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, standing at the garden gate with a basket of fresh vegetables. "Good morning, Grace." Mrs. Thompson greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Grace replied, returning the smile. "What brings you here today?" "I brought you some vegetables from my garden," Mrs. Thompson said, holding out the basket. "I thought you might like them." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Thompson," Grace said gratefully, accepting the basket. "You are always so kind to me." "It's my pleasure," Mrs. Thompson said. "Is everything all right? You seem a bit lost in thought today." Grace sighed and looked down at the vegetables in her hand. "I'm just feeling a little lonely, that's all," she admitted. "Donald has been away for a long time, and I miss him terribly. And we still haven't been blessed with children." Mrs. Thompson's expression softened with sympathy. "I understand, my dear. But don't lose hope. Sometimes miracles happen when we least expect them." Grace smiled weakly, grateful for Mrs. Thompson's words of comfort. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I will try to keep believing that someday our dream will come true." With a final wave, Mrs. Thompson bid Grace goodbye and went back to her own house. Grace watched her go, feeling a little lighter in her heart. As the days went on, Grace found solace in her garden, tending to her flowers and plants. She watered them tenderly and whispered words of encouragement as if they were her own children. And as she walked, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope stirring inside her. Night fell, and Grace went inside her house, feeling tired but content. She cooked herself a simple dinner and ate it quietly, thinking of Donald and praying for his safe return. As she got ready for bed, Grace looked out of the window at the starry sky above. She made a wish on the brightest star, a wish for happiness and love, for her and Donald, and for the family they hoped to have one day. With a sigh, Grace climbed into bed and closed her eyes, drifting off to sleep with a hopeful heart. As the days passed, Grace found herself sinking deeper into the loneliness of her marriage. With Donald away for work most of the time, she longed for companionship and affection. It was during one of her solitary outings to a local cafe that she met David. David was a charming man with a warm smile and a twinkle in his eye. He struck up a conversation with Grace, and before long, they found themselves lost in each other's company. They talked for hours, sharing stories and laughter as if they had known each other for years. Their connection was instant, like two pieces of a puzzle fitting perfectly together. Grace felt a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time, and she found herself drawn to David in a way she couldn't explain. As they parted ways that evening, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that she had found something special in David. She thought about him constantly, his laughter ringing in her ears like music. Days turned into weeks, and Grace found herself spending more and more time with David. They went for walks in the park, shared meals at cozy restaurants, and talked for hours on end. With David, Grace felt alive and happy in a way she hadn't felt in years. But deep down, she knew that what she was doing was wrong. She was married to Donald, and she had made a vow to love and honor him. Yet, she couldn't deny the strong pull she felt towards David. The way he made her heart flutter and her pulse quicken with just a smile. One evening, as they sat together in a secluded corner of the cafe, David took Grace's hand in his and looked into her eyes with love and longing. Grace, he said softly, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Grace's heart skipped a beat at his words. She looked into David's eyes, feeling torn between love and loyalty. Oh, David, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I I don't know what to say. David's expression softened with understanding. I know, Grace, but I love you more than anything in this world. Please, give us a chance to be together. Grace's mind was in turmoil as she struggled to make sense of her feelings. She knew that choosing David meant betraying Donald, the man she had promised to love and cherish. But she couldn't deny the overwhelming love she felt for David, the way he made her feel alive and whole again. I need time to think, Grace finally said, pulling her hand away gently. This is all happening so fast, and I need to sort out my feelings. David nodded, understandably, though disappointment flickered in his eyes. Of course, Grace, take all the time you need. Just know that my love for you will never waver. With a heavy heart, Grace bid David goodbye and made her way home. She felt torn between two worlds, unsure of which path to take. Deep down, she knew that whatever choice she made would change her life forever. But for now, she needed time to think, to weigh the consequences of her actions, and to listen to the voice of her heart. As days passed, Grace found herself torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was David, the charming man who had swept her off her feet with his love and affection. And on the other hand, there was Donald, her husband, whom she had promised to love and cherish. After much soul searching, Grace made a difficult decision to accept David's proposal and marry him. They had a small wedding with just few friends from David's side, and Grace felt a rush of happiness as she exchanged vows with David. But amidst the joy of her union, a cloud of guilt lingered in Grace's heart. She knew that she was keeping a dark secret from both David and Donald, a secret that had the power to shatter their lives. But the fear of losing both men kept her trapped in her web of deceit, and she continued to juggle her two marriages with practiced ease. Juggling two marriages proved to be a daunting task for Grace. She became a master of deception, carefully planning her days to ensure she could spend time with David while still maintaining her facade with Donald. Lies flowed effortlessly from her lips, and she concocted excuses for her whereabouts whenever she switched between her husbands. Sorry, honey, I had to work late at the office, Grace would say to Donald, her voice laced with false remorse. It's all right there, I understand, Donald would reply, unaware of the truth behind her words. Meanwhile, with David, Grace would spin a different tale to explain her absence. I had to help my friend with an emergency, she would say, her eyes downcast with feigned concern. I hope everything is okay. David would say, his brow furrowed with worry. As the days went by, Grace found herself sinking deeper into her web of lies, the weight of her guilt bearing down on her like a heavy burden. She knew that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could have devastating consequences if she were ever discovered. But despite her guilt, Grace couldn't bring herself to end either of her marriages. She was torn between her love for David and her loyalty to Donald, unable to choose between the two men who held her heart in their hands. And so, she continued to live a double life, moving through her days with a smile on her face and a heavy heart in her chest. She knew that she was walking a dangerous tightrope, one that could collapse at any moment and send her tumbling into the abyss. But for now, Grace remained trapped in her tangled web of deceit, unable to break free from the lies that had threatened to consume her. And as each day passed, the walls of her carefully constructed facade began to crumble, inch by agonizing inch, until there was nothing left but the truth waiting to be revealed. As time marched on, Grace's double life became increasingly precarious. The constant fear of discovery weighed heavily on her mind like a dark cloud looming over her every move. Despite the growing unease in her heart, she couldn't muster the courage to end either of her marriages. She found herself trapped in a relentless cycle of lies, her days consumed by the need to keep up appearances with both Donald and David. Every moment spent with one husband was tainted by the guilt of betraying the other. Grace felt like she was tiptoeing on thin ice, afraid that one wrong step would send her crashing into the icy depths below. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find a way to extricate herself from the tangled knots she had woven. One day, as Grace sat alone in David's house, the weight of her deception pressing down on her like a heavy burden, she received a phone call from David. "Hey, darling, are you free tonight?" David's voice came through the receiver, warm and familiar. Grace's heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. Yeah, I think so," she replied, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. "Great. I was thinking we could go out for dinner and catch a movie afterward. What do you say?" David asked. Grace hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, she longed to spend time with David, to lose herself in his embrace and forget about the tangled mess of her life for just a little while. But on the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at her conscience like a hungry beast. "Sure, that sounds lovely," Grace finally said, forcing a smile onto her face. "Perfect. I will pick you up at 7," David said cheerfully before hanging up. As Grace put down the phone, she felt a wave of despair wash over her like a crashing wave. She knew that every moment spent with David was a moment stolen from Donald, her husband, who trusted her implicitly. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to end the charade, to confess her sins and face the consequences of her actions. That evening, as she got ready to meet David, Grace looked at her reflection in the mirror and she saw the hollow eyes of a woman who had lost herself in a web of lies. She felt like a puppet on strings, dancing to the tune of her own deceit. Unable to break free from the chains that bound her, as she stepped out of the house and into the cold night air, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that her world was spiraling out of control. She knew that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could have devastating consequences if she were ever discovered. But for now, she remained trapped in the tangled knot of her own making, unable to find a way out. And as she climbed into David's car and drove off into the night, she couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep up the charade before it all come crashing down around her. One fateful day, fate intervened in Grace's careful, constructed world when Donald and David crossed paths at a business conference. It was a coincidence that neither of them could have predicted, and it would change everything. Donald and David found themselves sitting next to each other during a seminar, exchanging pleasantries and sharing stories about their lives. They had no idea that they were connected by a common thread, a woman who held both of their hearts in her hands. As they chat, Donald couldn't help but boast about his beautiful wife, Grace. He pulled out his phone and proudly showed David a picture of her, a smile lighting up his face as he talked about her with love and admiration. "This is Grace," Donald said, holding up the phone for David to see. "Isn't she just stunning?" David's heart skipped a beat as she looked at the picture of Grace, his wife. His mind raced with confusion as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. How could Donald know Grace? And more importantly, how could Grace be married to both of them? Unaware of the bombshell he was about to drop, Donald continued to sing Grace's praises, completely oblivious to the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. "She is the light of my life," Donald said, his voice filled with pride. "I am the luckiest man in the world to have her as my wife." David's mind was in turmoil as he struggled to come to terms with the revelation. He felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him, leaving him adrift in a sea of confusion and disbelief. "Donald, are, are you sure she's your wife?" David said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I know Grace too. In fact, she's she's my wife." Donald's eyes widened in shock. As David's words sank in, he looked at David, his mind reeling with disbelief. "What do you mean? She's your wife?" Donald asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I mean exactly what I said. Grace and I are married. I had no idea. I had no idea she was married to you too." The two men stared at each other in stunned silence, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air between them. They were both victims of Grace's deception, both caught in the tangled web of her lies. As the reality of the situation sank in, anger and betrayal bubbled up inside them like a raging storm. They felt like fools, duped by the woman they had loved and trusted with all their hearts. But amidst the turmoil of their emotions, there was a glimmer of clarity. They knew that they had to confront Grace and demand answers, to unravel the truth behind her web of deceit, and reclaim their lives from the chaos she had wrought. And so, with hearts heavy with betrayal and minds ablaze with determination, David and Donald set out to confront Grace and uncover the secrets that had torn their lives apart. Little did they know, the truth they sought would shake them to their core and change their lives forever. Determined to confront Grace about her deceit, Donald and David wasted no time in making their way to Donald's house. They had been blindsided by the revelation that Grace was leading a double life, and they couldn't bear to let her continue her charade any longer. As they stood before her, their hearts heavy with disappointment and betrayal, Grace's facade crumbled like a house of cards in a strong wind. She looked at them with tear-filled eyes, her shoulders slumped with shame and regret. "Grace, how could you?" David's voice was filled with pain as he stared at his wife, the woman he had trusted with his heart. David's expression was a mixture of hurt and anger as he confronted the woman he had thought was his soulmate. "I trusted you, Grace. I loved you with all my heart, and you lied to me." Grace hung her head, unable to meet their accusing gazes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant to hurt either of you. I was just I was just so afraid of losing both of you." Donald's eyes softened slightly at the sound of her voice, but the hurt in his heart was still raw and tender. "Why, Grace? Why did you do it?" Grace took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, and she struggled to find the words to explain her actions. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I was lonely and I felt trapped in my marriage to you. And then I met David and he made me feel alive again. I know it's no excuse for what I did, but I couldn't help myself." David's anger fled at her words. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You couldn't help yourself?" he repeated. "You destroyed two lives because you couldn't help yourself?" Grace recoiled at the sharpness in his tone, her heart breaking into a million pieces at the pain she had caused. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, please believe me when I say that I never meant to hurt either of you." The air was heavy with tension as Grace, Donald, and David faced the harsh reality of Grace's deception. They sat in the living room of Donald's house, the silence weighing heavily upon them like a suffocating blanket. Words were exchanged, emotions ran high, and wounds were reopened as they grappled with the pain of betrayal. Donald's voice trembled with hurt as he recounted the years of trust and love that Grace had shattered with her lies. "I thought we had something special, Grace," Donald said, his voice choked with emotion. "I trusted you with my heart, and you betrayed me." Grace hung her head, unable to meet his accusing gaze. "I'm so sorry, Donald," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant to hurt you." Grace reached out a trembling hand towards him, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "David, please," she begged. "I know I messed up, but I still love you. Please don't leave me." But David pulled away from her touch, his heart hardening with resolve. "I can't do this, Grace," he said, his voice filled with finality. "I can't be with someone who can't be honest with me. It's over." Grace's heart shattered into a million pieces at his words, the pain of his rejection cutting her to the core. She had lost the two men she loved most in the world, and it was all her fault. Donald's expression softened slightly as she looked at Grace, his heart breaking for the woman he had once called his wife. "Grace, I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he said quietly. but I don't want to see you suffer. You need to move on with your life and find a way to make things right. Grace nodded numbly, her mind reeling with the weight of her mistakes. She knew that she had a long road ahead of her, one filled with pain and regret. But she also knew that she had to face the consequences of her actions and find a way to atone for the damage she had caused. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Grace was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. With both Donald and David gone, she found herself adrift in a sea of loneliness and regret. The weight of her deceit hung heavy upon her shoulders, a constant reminder of the pain she had inflicted on those she loved. Alone in her house, Grace felt the full force of her mistakes crashing down upon her like a tidal wave. She had lost everything: her marriage, her love, her sense of self, all because of her inability to be honest with herself and those around her. But amidst the darkness of her despair, a glimmer of hope began to flicker deep within her heart. She knew that she couldn't change the past, but she could choose how to move forward from it. She could let her mistakes define her, or she could use them as stepping stones towards a brighter future. With a newfound determination, Grace vowed to learn from her mistakes and strive to become a better person. She enrolled in therapy sessions to address the root causes of her deception and to learn healthier ways of coping with her emotions. She also sought out support from friends and family, leaning on them for strength and guidance as she navigated the rocky road to redemption. But the journey was far from easy. There were days when Grace felt overwhelmed by guilt and shame, when the weight of her past mistakes threatened to drag her down into the depth of despair once more. But she refused to give up. She knew that she owed it to herself and to those she had hurt to keep moving forward one step at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Grace began to see glimmer of progress. She learned to forgive herself for her past mistakes, understanding that she was only human and that everyone makes errors in judgment from time to time. She also reached out to Donald and David, expressing her heartfelt apologies for the pain she had caused and her hopes for reconciliation in the future. Though it was a painful process, Grace knew that she was on the path to redemption. She had faced her demons head on and emerged stronger and wiser for it. And though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, she walked it with her head held high, knowing that she was capable of overcoming any obstacles that stood in her way. And as she looked towards the future with renewed hope and determination, Grace knew that she had finally found the strength to rise from the ashes of her past and build a brighter tomorrow for herself and those she held there. For in the end, it was not the mistakes we make that define us, but the way we choose to rise above them and strive for a better tomorrow. The moral lesson from this story is that honesty, integrity, and trust are essential foundations of any relationship. Grace's actions of deceit and betrayal led to the destruction of her marriages and caused immense pain to those she loved. Through her journey and redemption, she learned the importance of facing the consequences of her actions and striving to live a life guided by truth and integrity. The story teaches us that while mistakes are inevitable, it's how we choose to learn from them and grow that truly defines our character. It emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility for our actions, seeking forgiveness, and working towards rebuilding trust and relationships with honesty and humility. Thank you for watching this amazing story about Grace, Donald, and David on African Stories. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.